Hello, my name is Gabriela Trevino, and I will be presenting the Unpacking the TEKS English, Language Arts, and Reading Grade 6. Central Middle School. Central Middle School is within Wesco ISD, serves grades 6 through 8, strives to not only meet academic standards, but to prepare students for the future. I myself went to Central Middle School. It's a really good school. They have great teachers, great staff. They have a lot of teacher aides that are able to help you out when you need help. My favorite thing about Central Middle School was that because of the size of the school, almost all the staff members in the grade level knew every student. So I felt that they paid very close attention to our needs and anything that we needed in order to succeed. So I found that a very good quality from Central Middle School. That is really good when it comes to the academics because to students, it means that we care and that we're there for them. So overall, Central Middle School, I think was a really great school and continues to be. Central Middle School vision. At Central Middle School, we recognize that each student needs to be empowered to achieve success. With a partnership of parents, staff, and students, we are able to provide a positive learning environment for all students so that they are challenged to be technologically advanced critical thinkers and lifelong learners for the 21st century. So what does this mean? Um, Parent involvement is very important. It encourages students. Basically, there needs to be motivation from teachers, staff, and parents so that students can succeed. It is the vision of Central Middle School that parents are involved in their child's education, that staff is involved in their education, that we use our knowledge and encouragement to help these students succeed at Central Middle School. And what a better way to do it than to show them we care, to be there for them um, in their academics and personally if they need us to be. Central Middle School mission. The mission of Central Middle School is to educate all students in academics, enhance their personal and social growth, and to help them achieve their goals, as well as produce responsible, caring, and self-reliant role models in the community. So helping students set and meet goals is the mission. Encouraging them to be caring individuals and teaching others to be the same is important. Um, Schools today are trying many different strategies for students to, be respectful and kind to others, to stop the bullying in school. So I think schools overall are doing a really great job nowadays to implement those type of strategies with students. I think that sometimes schools are so concentrated on meeting the academic goal. Hey, our numbers, we need to meet the deadlines, we need to meet the numbers, that we also forget that we need to help these kids grow socially, to make friends, to play in PE and recess, um, to give them that type of uh, feeling where they don't feel alone or isolated or bullied. And I think that's very important when it comes to their academics as well. Objectives. Participants will gain a deeper understanding on the area of weakness for Central Middle School and gain understanding about TEK 6.5F. I will be presenting information from the TAPR reports, which is the Texas Academic Performance reports from TEA. This type of information, they separate information such as demographics and star scores for every fiscal year, every school year. They separate them into subpopulations and populations of how much staff, how many students there is, um, how what scores they met, if they met approaches or exceeded the expectations, and that's the information that will be explained today in this PowerPoint. I think it's important that we take a look at the TAPR reports, because those reports every year they put out the information such as scores, and you can compare them and see where the school's at and what it's lacking and what can be done differently. This type of information is available for anybody really who looks up the TAPR reports on TEA. If you look them up, you're able to choose a school, and then you see what school and what information you're looking for. So it'll show you if you're looking for the star scores, you're gonna go in there and search them, and you'll find the star scores and the progress of each fiscal year. Demographics. So these are the demographics that I was able to gather from the TAPR reports. They're as of December of 2019. So these are the numbers that I will be presenting and discussing. As of December 2019, there was 291 sixth graders, 300 were seventh grade, 312 is eighth grade. That's 903 students in total. The 2019 subpopulations were 76.90% economically disadvantaged, which is students that were considered low income. There was 43.60% at risk, 17.50 English learners, and 6.10% Section 504. The at-risk learners are, students who are temporarily struggling and need intervention to succeed academically. Um, the English learners are students who came to Central Middle School who are learning English. And Section 504 will be your students with disabilities. Now, I used this chart so that you can see the difference in each of the subpopulations. As you can see, there's a lot of students who are economically disadvantaged, and there's a lot of students who are at risk. What does this say? It just says that a lot of students need assistance and a lot of students need extra help. Students who might be economically disadvantaged may not have enough money, enough materials to do their homework. And what if they get an assignment where they have a science project and they have to buy things? There's a lot of students out there, and I don't know if all the schools really compare their economically disadvantaged numbers, but it is something that all schools should look at and acknowledge, because it's something that I think down here in the RGV we struggle with that a lot. The at risk as well, I believe from what I know and from experience, students who are economically disadvantaged are also noticed as at risk. So that's why those numbers, they're not super close, but they're somewhat there. These are the sixth grade STAR reading and math scores from the TAPR reports. As you can see, everything in blue is approaches and everything in red is meets. Approaches means that they barely made the cut for scoring, for passing, and meets is that they actually met the standard, met the grade level. Um, I have it set up to where you can see 2017 reading and math, 2018 reading and math, and 2019 reading and math. As you can see, there is a lot of blue, which means that a lot of students scored approaches. Approaches is something that is passing, but at the same time, you want your students to meet their grade level. So to see a lot of blue on there, you can tell that a lot of students are barely making it in both reading and math. I know that sixth grade is when these two subjects start getting a little bit tougher, so some students may struggle a little bit, but to meet approaches, I feel like maybe they should, try to improve a little bit of strategy and put some strategy in there where students can actually meet their grade level, some study guides or more information for them. Data analysis. Students are scoring approaches more than meets grade level. So on the data that was presented before, you can see that there was more blue than there was red. That means that there was more approaches than meets. And that's not really a good thing, although it is passing. You really want your students to be on meets. So scores are below the system's safeguards of the standard 60%. Based on the information presented on the campus improvement plan for Central Middle School, the standard safeguards is 60%. So students should be at 60% or above. The TEK we will be talking about today is 6.5F from Figure 19. That is chapter 110 of the TEKS for the English, Language Arts, and Reading. Reading comprehension skills. Students use a flexible range of metacognitive reading skills in both assigned and independent reading to understand an author's message. Students will continue to apply earlier standards with greater depth in increasingly more complex texts as they become self-directed, critical readers. The student is expected to D. Make inferences about texts and use textual evidence to support understanding. As we noticed in the demographics, we have a lot of students that are at risk and economically disadvantaged and English learners. So I feel like this affects their reading comprehension skills. So when they're reading a story or they're doing an assignment, they do have a hard time sometimes comprehending what they are reading. When using metacognitive skills, it means that students are thinking about thinking. They're planning in their head, they're monitoring, they're evaluating the story, the reading, or the section that it is they're going over. And at the same time, they're identifying the purpose of the reading. They're selecting any particular actions that they might think are important throughout the reading in the end for the conclusion. And they're also evaluating, they're trying to relate the story to a real life situation or to anything that they might be familiar with or anything that makes sense to them in their head in order for them to understand the reading. The way we teach the students to comprehend is the way that they're gonna learn to understand something. So if we teach them, okay, in order for you to comprehend, you have to write this down. Well, then they're going to learn, okay, when I write it down, I'm going to understand it and it's going to make more sense to me. So those are the type of skills that we teach the students, strategies to where they are comprehending. Sometimes they're more of visual learners and finding the evidence in the story, which are all good skills as well. Comprehension. Some comprehension skills are listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. Some strategies for comprehension are to reread the text. to use context clues. They can find little clues that will be used at the end of the reading that they believe describes the reason for something happening. They can also think out loud. They can talk about it. They can talk about the story, and that'll help them truly understand it. Another thing that students can do is they can summarize the story. Normally, I've seen other teachers use a chart that has them, do like a little tree of these are the characters, this is the setting, this is the problem, and how are we going to solve it? How do they solve it in the story? And that's where they truly understand, oh, cause and effect, or this happened because of this person, or things like that. The student uses metacognitive skills to both develop and deepen comprehension of increasingly complex text. It's important that we teach students that while they're reading the story or the passage that was provided to them, that they're evaluating and understanding in their own way, if need be, the purpose of the story and the conclusion and everything all put together in one so that they can understand it the way that they feel is easier for them. Some students like to visualize the story or make drawings, illustrate. That's the way that they comprehend the true meaning behind a story. While students are evaluating the story, they can also start making predictions, and this will help them understand what they believe will happen next in the story. And that really says that they're actually understanding the story at the same time. Making inferences. This is the most important part of the TEK. Making inferences is making reasonable connections within and beyond the text, drawing conclusions about information or ideas not explicitly stated in the text. For example, a student can infer that a story titled Eating Vegetables may be about the unpleasantness of eating vegetables. So if a student reads the title Eating Vegetables, they automatically in their head they infer that thought of, "Ooh, vegetables are gross. So this must be about the grossness of eating vegetables." And that is the student inferring to that story, that title of the story. The inferences really means to read the clues, to think about what you know, and to figure out what makes sense to you about what you know and what's going on in the story. You're making an inference. It's sort of like a conclusion based on the ideas in your head. It also means to figure out something that isn't explained in the story directly. So it's not going to say, I did this because I was sad. It's just gonna have a explanation, and you're gonna have to think about it. The student's gonna have to think about it and make that conclusion based on the clues around it. A good strategy that I've seen in the past is teachers give out a handout of students of pictures where there is people making a face or showing an emotion, and the question is, what do you think is happening in this picture? So they're sort of making an inference, even though they're not reading a passage, they're making an inference on what they think is going on in the picture, which is the same thing if you think about it, about what is going on in the reading and finding the clues for it. In order to make inferences, students really need to comprehend what's going on in the story. So it's important that teachers implement strategies so that students are able to comprehend the purpose of the passage. So basically, to make inferences, students have to first think, what does this text tell me? And then they have to think, what do I already know? And last but not least, what can I infer? Which means, what can I conclude from the clues that I found in the passage or the story? It basically means to read between the lines of the story. Textual evidence. Textual evidence is the facts in the reading and the proof in your story. Students should use the information presented in the text to make reasonable, logical assumptions. Evidence that corroborates understanding, for example, students underlining clues in the reading. I remember in school, they used to show us to go back into our reading and make sure that we underline where exactly we believe the answer was. It wasn't ever the actual direct answer. It was just the supporting reason why we thought that was the answer. And then right next to it, we had to write on a paragraph why we thought that that reason was the answer. And it really helped out because it helped figure out if that truly was the answer, because then you would go back and look at the question, and when you would write it in and write in your reason why you thought that was the answer, it would make sense. And when it wouldn't make sense, you knew that that wasn't the answer. When students go back for evidence in the story, they're looking for evidence to support an idea or to answer a question or to prove something. I think also this is a really good strategy for students to understand what citing is, because in college, like us right now in college, we have to cite our work and we make sure we have to find proof and evidence to support our claims. And that way they're starting early, they're going back, underlining, and letting teachers know this is where I got my evidence. I know some parents sometimes get frustrated with students' homework when on the question it says support your answer. But at the same time, this is the only way that teachers are truly able to see in the homeworks that students are actually going back to their reading and finding the answer and comprehending what it is that they're reading. So it's really important for them to provide the evidence and the proof as to where they got this answer and how they came about this answer and what is the reason that they think that that is the correct answer. What should readers use to support their inferences? They should use the text with supporting details, knowledge from other texts with information learned from other texts, and personal experience, own experiences related to the topic in a text. The little picture that I put there is a little girl with a magnifying glass, because that's really what they're doing. They're going with a magnifying glass, they're searching for clues like a detective. They're looking for those clues to support their inferences, their conclusions, the details that are going to support their knowledge from other texts. They're going to support their personal experience based on their conclusion that they made and their inference that they made about the text. The information is never going to be directly stated in the text, and that is why students need to have prior knowledge of some of the topics in the readings. That way they can make conclusions themselves and make inferences. They need to think out of the box, and thinking out of the box is what is really going to help them overall. I truly believe that schools nowadays need to create more strategies to help students comprehend how to make inferences, how to draw conclusions based on their prior knowledge, because I feel like this is a topic that schools such as Central Middle School is lacking students to truly understand what it is that they're reading and base conclusions on the supporting details that they're acquiring during their reading. So what is a inference supported by personal experience? I would compare it to, just like before that I mentioned the vegetable story, I would compare it to how a student will understand that a story about vegetables might be about how vegetables don't taste good based on their personal experience. They don't think vegetables taste good, so they're going to assume that the story is about vegetables not tasting good, and that is them making an inference about the story. From my personal experience, I think that students really learn a lot with pictures. Um, that helps them truly visualize what it is you're trying to explain to them. And that helps them a lot. Here we have our organized unpacked teak. I call it the organized because it's actually in a chart, very organized. We can start with student expectations. The expectations are to make inferences about text and use textual evidence to support understanding. The performance is what are students supposed to do? In here we plug in a verb, so the students are supposed to infer or defend. I chose defend because they have to defend their reason for concluding, for inferring about what it was that they read. So that's why I chose defend. Content. What are students supposed to know? They're supposed to know how to make conclusions based on inferences about the text and support them with evidence. The evidence, again, can be from the text, and it has to be from the text. You find the clues like the little detective in the video. The rigor, that's Bloom's level, is comprehension. Readiness or supporting, this is readiness, although I believe it's also mentioned that it's supporting readiness because we're showing them to prepare for later on. As I mentioned before, finding evidence is sort of like citing. When we go back and cite our essays, cite our the proof for our facts, or show evidence from our readings. When we're showing evidence from our readings, we're citing. So I think this is us preparing students for the future, for what it is going to be like in college, in high school and in college. Um, so I believe it is readiness. I feel that this teak is very underappreciated. It is a teak that all teachers should address and make known, that it's very important for students to go back into their text and find the evidence to support their answers, make inferences and draw conclusions about what it is that they're reading and the reason behind it and the purpose. We as teachers should teach students to be able to make an inference, um, and grasp it with the subtle underlying meanings in the text without actual evidence in the story, just the clues where they can make that inference. Some students today can redo a whole passage and not understand what they just read. And that's the problem today with reading, is that students are not really comprehending what it is that they're reading. And that's why making inferences and finding the evidence in the stories is really important. I was able to provide another example of a question that was provided from a TEKS guide that I got from TEA. The question says, the teacher can conclude from the information on paragraph 3 that Stuart A. worried that his portrait would not please Washington, B. was determined to create a portrait of Washington, C. was nervous in the presence of Washington, or D. shared similar interests with Washington. This type of question is the type of question that is presented in assessments, where students are to make inferences and base a conclusion not on direct evidence on the story, but by clues. So if there was a clue in the story that said, that directed the student to believe that Stuart was worried, then the answer would possibly be A, because he found clues where the character Stuart was worried. Overall, I think that TEAC 6.5F is very underappreciated and underutilized, and it needs to be addressed with schools today. Central Middle School scores in reading were great for approaching, but if they want to be at meets, they do need to improve strategies that could align with 6.5F, which will allow students to comprehend the reading and learn to make inferences as well as textual evidence uh, in the story. Central Middle School is a great school, but of course, there's always room for improvement, and we want the best for the students. So it's a really good idea, to implement more strategies, implement more assignments that will align with 6.5F to help students comprehend, have them do more hands-on activities. It should really help and increase reading scores. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for watching.